The crystalline halls of the Valdian imperial palace stretched impossibly high, their surfaces catching and refracting light from 3 artificial suns that orbited the capital world. Commander Adrian Cross stood at the entrance to the Grand Assembly, his scarred hands clasped behind his back, watching as delegates from a dozen star systems filed past him with barely concealed disdain. The humans had arrived. 3,000 years. That's how long the Valdian Empire had ruled this sector of the galaxy. 3,000 years of technological advancement, cultural refinement, and unquestioned supremacy. And now, humanity barely 2 centuries into faster-than-light travel had been granted an audience. Adrian could practically taste the contempt in the air, thick as the perfumed atmosphere the Valdians preferred. "Remember," Ambassador Helena Reeves whispered beside him, adjusting her formal robes, "we're here to establish trade relations. Nothing more. Keep your temper in check." Adrian's jaw tightened. "My temper is the least of our concerns, Ambassador." The truth was, Adrian shouldn't have been here at all. He was a soldier, not a diplomat. But when your species is considered barely above sentient by half the galaxy, you send your best, and Adrian Cross had survived more battles than any other human in the United Earth Forces. His presence was meant to be a statement. Humanity might be young, but we were survivors. The massive doors before them dissolved into shimmering particles, revealing the Grand Assembly in all its overwhelming glory. The chamber was a perfect sphere, with delegates floating at various levels on gravity platforms that defied human understanding. At the apex, on a throne that seemed carved from a single massive diamond, sat Queen Ardelia Valdian. Even from this distance, Adrian could see she was magnificent. The Valdians were humanoid enough: 2 arms, 2 legs, a head where you'd expect it, but that's where the similarities ended. Their skin had an opalescent quality, shifting between pearl and silver, depending on the angle of light. Their eyes were larger than humans, with irises that held entire galaxies of color. The Queen's hair, if you could call the flowing strands of what looked like living starlight hair, cascaded around her shoulders like a nebula. But it wasn't the Queen who drew Adrian's attention. It was the younger Valdian floating beside her throne. Princess Serafina Valdian looked like she'd been carved from moonlight and disdain. Where her mother projected regal authority, Serafina radiated pure, undiluted arrogance. She was examining her fingernails, which seemed to be made of some crystalline substance, with the kind of studied boredom that only the truly privileged could master. "The human delegation may approach," announced a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Adrian and Ambassador Reeves walked forward, their magnetic boots clicking against the crystalline floor, a sound that seemed absurdly primitive in this space. They stopped at the designated marker, a subtle shift in the floor's pattern that indicated the proper distance for supplicants. "Your Majesty," Ambassador Reeves began, offering the ceremonial bow that had been painstakingly researched and practiced. "We thank you for this audience. Humanity comes before you with open hands and honest intentions." A laugh, bright and sharp as breaking glass, cut through the formal greeting. Princess Serafina had straightened in her seat, and she was looking at them with undisguised amusement. "Mother, they walk on the floor, like insects. How absolutely precious." The chamber fell silent. Even the subtle harmonics that provided ambient sound seemed to pause. Adrian felt something hot and dangerous stir in his chest, but he kept his face neutral. He'd been called worse by better. Queen Ardelia's expression didn't change, but something in her posture shifted slightly. "Serafina." "What?" The princess gestured languidly toward them. "Are we truly meant to pretend this is a meeting of equals? They've barely discovered quantum entanglement. Their ships still use combustion reactions for sublight travel. They haven't even eliminated death from their biology." She tilted her head. Studying Adrian with the same interest, one might show a particularly amusing pet. "Look at that one. It's covered in scars. They haven't even mastered basic cellular regeneration. Your Highness, Ambassador Reeves said carefully, humanity may be young by galactic standards, but we believe our perspective and experiences could offer valuable, Serafina laughed again, and this time, others in the assembly joined her. Not all, Adrian noted, but enough. What could you possibly offer us? Your entire civilization could fit in one of our museum wings. You still believe in concepts like money and marriage. You wage wars over resources that we can create from base atoms. You are children playing with fire and asking to sit at the table of gods. The laughter grew louder. Adrian saw Ambassador Reeves's face flush red, saw her hands tremble slightly. This was going exactly as badly as the pessimist back on Earth had predicted. And then Adrian stepped forward. The laughter stopped. You're right, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. He'd been told the translator would handle the linguistic conversion, but he hadn't been told it would preserve tone. Good. He wanted them to hear every edge in his words. We are young, we are scarred, we still die, we... He took another step forward, past the designated marker. Several guards shifted, hands moving to weapons. But the Queen raised a finger, and they stilled. But let me tell you what else we are. Princess. Adrian pulled off his formal jacket, revealing the compression shirt underneath and the latticework of scars that covered his arms. We are the species that looked at the void and said we belong there. We are the ones who strapped ourselves to controlled explosions just to touch our own moon. We lost thousands learning to leave our world, and we counted it a bargain price. Serafina's smile faltered slightly. You mastered death, Adrian continued, his voice gaining strength. We master living with it. Every human knows their time is limited, so every moment matters. You create resources from atoms. We learned to share what little we had, to sacrifice for strangers, to die for ideas. You think our scars make us weak. Every scar is a battle we survived, a lesson learned in blood and pain that your perfect regeneration will never teach you. He was close to the floating platform now, close enough to see the swirling galaxies in Serafina's eyes, narrow with something that might have been anger or interest. You've had 3,000 years of safety, of superiority, of certainty, Adrian said. We've had 200 years of struggle, of loss, of clawing our way up from the dirt to stand before you. And in those 200 years, we've gone from throwing rocks at each other to crossing the void between stars. What will we do with the next 200, the next 1,000? He smiled then, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. You call us insects, Princess, but insects survive, they adapt, they swarm, and given enough time, they can bring down giants. The silence in the chamber was absolute now. Adrian could hear his own heartbeat, wondered if the Valdians could hear it too with their enhanced senses. Princess Serafina stood, or rather, she shifted from sitting to standing in a movement that seemed to ignore several laws of physics. She descended from her platform, each step creating small ripples of light in the air, until she stood before Adrian. She was taller than him by a few inches, and this close. He could see that her skin wasn't just opalescent, it contained actual stars, tiny points of light that moved in slow, hypnotic patterns. You dare lecture me, human. Her voice was soft, dangerous. You dare stand in our sacred hall, bearing the marks of your own inadequacy, and speak to me of survival. I dare, Adrian replied simply. For a moment, they stood there, alien royalty and human soldier, locked in a contest of wills that had nothing to do with technology or civilization, and everything to do with something far more primitive. Then Serafina smiled, and it was somehow worse than her contempt. Very well, human. You speak of survival of adaptation. Let us test these claims. She turned to address the assembly. I invoke the right of challenge. A collective gasp rippled through the chamber. Even Queen Ardelia straightened slightly on her throne. Seraphina, the queen's voice held a warning. The law is clear. Mother, any visiting delegate may be challenged to prove their worth through trial. It hasn't been invoked in 8 centuries. But the law stands. She turned back to Adrian. Unless, of course, the brave human warrior would prefer to apologize for his impertinence and crawl back to his dirt-covered world. Ambassador Reeves stepped forward quickly. Your Highness, Commander Cross is not authorized to... I accept. The words were out before Adrian could stop them. But even if he could take them back, he wouldn't have. He'd seen too many human colonies looked down upon. Too many of his people treated as second-class citizens of the galaxy. Too much assumption that youth meant weakness. Seraphina's smile widened, showing teeth that were just slightly too sharp to be comforting. Excellent. Tomorrow, at the zenith of the first sun, you will face the trial of proving in the ancient amphitheater. Survive, and you will have earned the right to speak in this assembly. Fail. She shrugged elegantly. And humanity will have proven what everyone already knows, that you are not ready for the greater galaxy. She leaned in close. Close enough that Adrian could smell something like ozone and starlight. I'm going to enjoy watching you beg, she whispered. Then she was gone, flowing back up to her platform in a reverse cascade of physics-defying grace. Queen Ardelia stood, and when she spoke, her voice filled the entire chamber. The challenge has been issued and accepted. Tomorrow, we shall witness the trial of proving. This assembly is adjourned. The delegates began filing out, many shooting looks at Adrian that ranged from pitying to amused to calculating. Ambassador Reeves grabbed his arm the moment protocol allowed. What have you done? She hissed. Adrian watched as Princess Seraphina disappeared through a doorway of pure light, her laughter echoing behind her like broken music. What needed to be done, he said quietly. But as they were escorted to their quarters' sparse rooms that were probably considered insulting by Valdian standards, Adrian found himself thinking about the Queen's expression when Seraphina had issued the challenge. For just a moment, just a fraction of a second, she had looked at him with something that wasn't contempt or amusement or cold royal assessment. She had looked at him with recognition. That night, as Adrian lay on a bed that was slightly the wrong shape for human anatomy, he stared at the ceiling, which showed a real-time view of the triple stars, and wondered what game he'd really been drawn into. The princess's challenge was obvious, a spoiled royal putting an upstart species in its place. But the queen... A soft chime drew his attention to the door. The Valdians didn't knock, apparently. The door simply became translucent, showing him who was on the other side. It was a servant, if the simple robes were any indication. But even Valdian servants carried themselves with more grace than most human diplomats. Commander Cross, the servant said, their voice carefully neutral. You have been summoned. By whom? Someone who wishes to discuss tomorrow's trial. Someone who believes you should know what you've truly accepted. Adrian sat up. This could be a trap. But then again, the entire trip had been a kind of trap from the start. Lead the way, he said. The servant led him through corridors that seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions. Past gardens where plants sang in harmonious chorus. Through a gallery where the paintings literally lived and breathed and changed based on who was viewing them. Finally, they arrived at a door that looked like it was made from frozen aurora borealis. Enter, came a voice from within. A familiar voice. Adrian stepped through the door and found himself in a private study that was simultaneously intimate and vast. Books, actual physical books, lined shelves that curved in impossible ways. A fire that burned without heat or fuel cast dancing shadows. And standing before a window that looked out onto the birth of a nebula was Queen Ardelia herself. Your Majesty, Adrian began, starting to bow. Stop. She didn't turn around. There's no one here to perform for Commander Cross. Or should I say, Adrian. The use of his first name sent a chill down his spine. "You don't remember me," she said, finally turning. Without the formal regalia and the distance of the throne room, she looked. Younger wasn't the right word. More real, perhaps. But then, why would you? It was one battle among hundreds for you. One more desperate stand. One more impossible victory. Adrian frowned. "I'm sorry, Your Majesty, but I don't—" 15 years ago, the Cathari incursion, a human colony called New Haven. The memory hit Adrian like a physical blow. New Haven, the colony that shouldn't have survived. The Cathari had come in force, their bioships tearing through the planet's defenses like tissue paper. Adrian had been a lieutenant then, leading a squad of Marines in what everyone knew was a last stand. They'd held the evacuation point for 18 hours against odds that still gave him nightmares. "You were there?" he asked. "I was observing, secretly. The Valdians had trade interests in that sector, and I wanted to see if humanity was worth protecting or if we should write off our investments." She moved to pour something from a crystalline decanter into 2 glasses. "I was caught in the assault. My stealth ship was damaged. I would have died if not for a young human soldier who dragged me from the wreckage and defended me for 3 hours, while asking no questions about who or what I was." Adrian's scarred hands clenched. He remembered. A woman in strange armor, unconscious, bleeding silver blood. He'd assumed she was from one of the allied species. He'd never— "You never reported it," Ardelia continued, handing him a glass. The liquid inside swirled with colors that shouldn't exist. "You saved my life and never spoke of it." "There was no point," Adrian said quietly. "We were all going to die anyway. What did it matter? But you didn't die. You held until reinforcements arrived. You saved 8,000 colonists and one very foolish Valdian queen who had thought herself above the chaos of lesser species wars." She sipped her drink, and Adrian followed suit. It tasted like moonlight felt. "My daughter doesn't know," Ardelia said. "She doesn't know that her contempt for humanity is directed at the very species that ensured she still has a mother. She doesn't know that human determination, human sacrifice, human compassion saved my life." "Why didn't you say anything in the throne room?" "Because Serafina needs to learn this lesson herself. She has been raised in absolute privilege, absolute safety, absolute certainty of Valdian superiority. The trial tomorrow. It's not what she thinks it is." Adrian set down his glass. "What is it?" "It's meant to test not the body, but the spirit. Not strength, but character. The ancient amphitheater will present you with challenges that no amount of technology or physical prowess can overcome. It will require something the Valdians have almost forgotten how to value." She met his eyes. "It will require humanity. And if I fail, then my daughter's worldview remains intact, and humanity remains a footnote in galactic history." She turned back to the window. "But I don't think you'll fail." Adrian Cross. "You didn't fail when the odds were worse and the stakes were personal." "The stakes feel pretty personal now, too." Ardelia smiled, and for a moment she looked almost human. "Yes, I suppose they do. More personal than you know." Before Adrian could ask what she meant, she waved her hand and the door reappeared. "Rest now. Commander, tomorrow, you carry the hopes of your entire species into that arena. But know this, you won't be as alone as you think." Adrian wanted to ask more, but he recognized a dismissal when he heard one. He bowed properly this time and made his way to the door. "Adrian!" He turned back. "When you see Serafina tomorrow, really look at her. Look at her the way a soldier assesses a battlefield. You might be surprised by what you see." With that cryptic comment, the Queen turned back to her window, and Adrian found himself in the corridor with the servant, being led back to his quarters. His mind raced with questions. What had Ardelia meant? What was she not telling him? As he lay back down on the alien bed, staring at the triple stars, one thought kept circling back the way Ardelia had said, "More personal than you know." Tomorrow couldn't come fast enough. The ancient amphitheater materialized around Adrian, like a fever dream, given form. He'd been transported there at dawn, the process feeling like being dissolved and rebuilt atom by atom. Now he stood at the center of an arena that defied every law of physics he knew. The floor beneath his feet appeared to be made of condensed starlight, solid enough to stand on, but translucent enough to see the swirling cosmos beneath. The walls rose in impossible spirals, covered in hieroglyphs that seemed to move when he wasn't looking directly at them. Above, instead of a ceiling, there was simply space. Not the sky, but actual space, complete with slowly rotating galaxies and the occasional streak of a comet. The three suns of the Valdian system hung at different points, casting shadows that overlapped in ways that made his eyes water if he stared too long. The stands were already filling with spectators, Valdians primarily, their opalescent skin catching and reflecting the strange light. But Adrian spotted other species too, the insectoid Cathari with their compound eyes, the gaseous nebula drifters contained in their environmental suits, even a few of the ancient archons whose very presence seemed to bend reality around them. Quite the turnout for a human's humiliation, Adrian muttered to himself. "Oh, this is more entertainment than we've had in decades," came a cheerful voice from behind him. Adrian turned to find Lord Caliph standing there, and immediately his soldier's instincts screamed danger. The Valdian nobleman was everything Seraphina was tall, ethereal, impossibly beautiful, but where her arrogance felt like youthful pride, his felt like something colder, more calculated. "Lord Caliph," Adrian said, inclining his head slightly. He'd done his homework last night, unable to sleep. Caliph was old, even by Valdian standards, a traditionalist who'd opposed humanity's inclusion in the galactic community from the start. "Commander Cross, I wanted to wish you luck before your inevitable defeat." Caliph's smile was all teeth. "Though I suppose luck won't help you much. Do you know what you'll be facing?" "I was told the trial test character, not strength." Caliph laughed. A sound like wind chimes in a hurricane. "Oh, how charmingly naive. Yes, it tests character. Specifically, it tests how much character you can maintain while being torn apart at the molecular level." He leaned in close, and Adrian smelled something metallic and wrong. The last being who attempted the trial was a Cathari warrior poet. They found pieces of him in 17 different dimensions. Before Adrian could respond, a fanfare of impossible music filled the arena. The spectators fell silent as Queen Ardelia appeared on a floating dais, resplendent in robes that seemed to be woven from nebulae. Beside her, Princess Seraphina stood in armor that looked decorative, but probably cost more than Earth's entire defense budget. "Citizens of the galaxy," Ardelia's voice resonated through the space without amplification. "We gather today to witness the trial of proving, invoked by my daughter, Princess Seraphina, and accepted by Commander Adrian Cross of Earth." Seraphina stepped forward, her armor catching the light from the three suns. "The terms are simple, human. Survive 3 challenges, and your species earns the right to speak as equals in our assembly. Fail, and humanity acknowledges its place as subjects, not partners, in the galactic order." "And if I die?" Adrian asked, his voice carrying clearly across the arena. "Then you die," Seraphina said simply. "But don't worry, we'll return your body to Earth, most of it, anyway." The crowd laughed. Adrian didn't. "The first challenge," Queen Ardelia announced, and the arena floor began to shift and change, "is the trial of fear." The starlight beneath Adrian's feet suddenly gave way, and he was falling, not through space, but through something worse, through layers of reality that showed him glimpses of things that shouldn't exist. He saw planets where time ran backward, where effect preceded cause. He saw versions of himself dying in countless ways, each death more horrific than the last. He saw Earth burning, humanity extinct, forgotten, erased from the cosmic record as if they'd never existed at all. Then he hit solid ground, and the arena had changed. He stood in a recreation of New Haven, not the colony as it was now, rebuilt and thriving, but as it had been during the Cathari attack. Bodies littered the streets. Buildings burned with that peculiar green fire the bioships used. And there, in the distance, he could hear them, the screams of the civilians he'd failed to save. "Interesting," came Serafina's voice from everywhere and nowhere. "Your greatest fear isn't death. It's failure." The scene shifted, and Adrian was in his childhood home on Earth. His mother lay dying in bed, the cancer that had taken her eating away at her body, while he, 8 years old again in this nightmare, stood helplessly by. "You couldn't save her," Serafina's voice taunted. "Just like you couldn't save them all at New Haven. Just like you can't save humanity from being ground under the heel of superior civilizations." The scene shifted again. Now he stood in the assembly hall from yesterday, but this time he was alone. Completely alone. Earth was empty behind him. Humanity was gone, and he was the last, standing before an assembly of beings who looked at him like he was a curiosity in a museum. "The last human," Serafina narrated, "preserved as a reminder of a species that reached for the stars and burned themselves on them." Adrian closed his eyes, feeling the fear trying to crawl up his throat, trying to make him scream, make him beg. But then he remembered something. A quote from an old Earth philosopher whose name had been lost to time. "Courage is not the absence of fear, but action in spite of it." "You're right," he said to the nightmare around him. "I am afraid. I'm afraid of failure. I'm afraid of loss. I'm afraid of being the last." He opened his eyes, and they were steady. "But fear is what kept us alive in the dark. Fear of the night made us discover fire. Fear of winter made us learn to store food. Fear of death made us reach for immortality among the stars." He took a step forward in the nightmare assembly. "I'm afraid, but I'm here anyway. That's not weakness, princess. That's the entire history of humanity in a single sentence. We were afraid, but we did it anyway." The nightmare shattered like glass, and Adrian was back in the real arena. The crowd was silent. Even Serafina, on her platform, had lost her smirk. "The first challenge is passed," Queen Ardelia announced. And was there approval in her voice? "The second challenge," she continued, "is the trial of pain." Adrian barely had time to brace himself before it hit. Not physical pain that would have been too simple. This was deeper, more fundamental. Every loss he'd ever experienced hit him at once. Every friend who died under his command. Every civilian he'd failed to protect. Every moment of grief and regret compressed into a single, overwhelming instant. He fell to one knee, gasping. The crowd leaned forward, eager to see the human break. But pain was an old friend to Adrian Cross. Physical, emotional, psychological, he'd endured them all. The trick wasn't to fight it or deny it. The trick was to acknowledge it, to let it flow through you without letting it define you. "Is this all?" he gritted out, forcing himself back to his feet. "You want to see me experience loss? I've buried 342 soldiers under my command. I know each of their names, their faces, their favorite jokes. Sarah Martinez loved terrible puns. Marcus Thompson could sing opera. Yuki Tanaka made the best coffee in the entire fleet, even with recycled water and synthetic beans." He stood fully now, tears streaming down his face, but his voice steady. "You think pain breaks us? Pain teaches us. Every loss carves us into something stronger, not in spite of the hurt, but because of it. We carry our dead with us. Princess, they make us who we are." The pain receded, leaving him exhausted but standing. The crowd was no longer laughing. Some of the Valdians were looking at him with something that might have been respect or fear. The second challenge is passed, Queen Ardelia said. Seraphina descended from her platform, her armor shifting and changing as she moved. Enough games, she said. The third challenge is simple. Human. The trial of combat. Against you, Adrian asked. She laughed, but it wasn't as confident as before. Against our champion. The arena floor opened, and something rose from beneath. Adrian's first thought was that someone had decided to give a nightmare physical form and then fed it steroids. The creature stood 12 feet tall, covered in scales that shifted between dimensions, making it hard to look at directly. It had too many arms, each ending in claws that looked like they could cut through spaceship hulls. Its head was vaguely reptilian, but with eyes that held an intelligence that was definitely not animal. This is a Void Stalker, Seraphina announced, genetically engineered by the Valdians 3,000 years ago as the ultimate warrior. It has never been defeated in single combat. The crowd cheered. This was what they'd come for. The primitive human against the pinnacle of Valdian military science. Adrian looked at the creature, then at his hands. Scarred, human hands. He had no weapons, no armor, nothing but the clothes on his back and whatever wit he could muster. The Void Stalker charged. Adrian dove to the side, feeling claws whistle through the air where his head had been. He rolled, came up running, his mind racing. He couldn't match it for strength or speed. But maybe. Hey, ugly, he shouted. Yeah, you did they design you in a committee because you look like someone couldn't decide between scary and ridiculous, and just went with both? The creature paused, its head tilting. The crowd fell silent, confused. Adrian kept moving, kept talking. Seriously, how many arms do you need? Are you fighting me or trying to win a hugging contest? And those scales, are you a warrior or a disco ball? The Void Stalker roared and charged again, but Adrian noticed something. It was getting angrier, and anger made it sloppy. One of its many arms clipped a pillar, sending crystal shards flying. 3,000 years of genetic engineering and they couldn't give you a sense of humor. Adrian taunted, sliding between its legs. No wonder you've never been defeated. Everyone else died of boredom. The creature spun, all its arms swinging wildly. Adrian ducked, weaved, and kept up his verbal assault. You know what the problem with being undefeated is. You've never learned from a loss. You've never had to adapt, to think, to be anything more than what they made you. The Void Stalker's attacks were becoming more frenzied, less coordinated. It was used to opponents who faced it with fear or aggression, not mockery. But here's the thing about humans, Adrian said, grabbing one of the crystal shards from the broken pillar. We lose all the time. We fail constantly. And each time, we learn something new. He didn't try to attack the creature directly. Instead, he used the shard to reflect light from the three suns directly into its eyes. The Void Stalker, designed for combat in the shadows between dimensions, recoiled from the concentrated stellar radiation. Like the fact that you're part shadow-based entity, Adrian continued, moving to keep the light focused on it. Which means you're vulnerable to concentrated light. Took me a minute to figure out why you kept shifting to keep certain angles in shadow. The creature stumbled, its form beginning to destabilize. Adrian pressed his advantage, grabbing more shards, creating a makeshift array of mirrors. 3,000 years of being undefeated, he said. And you're going to lose to a human with some broken glass and a bad attitude. The Void Stalker made one last desperate charge. But Adrian was ready. He angled all his mirrors at once, catching the light from all three suns and focusing it on the creature's center mass. There was a sound like reality tearing, and the Void Stalker simply ceased. Not died, not disappeared, just stopped existing in this dimension. The arena was absolutely silent. Adrian stood there, breathing hard, covered in sweat and small cuts from the crystal shards. He looked up at Princess Seraphina, who was staring at him with an expression he couldn't read. "Your champion is defeated," he said simply. "Does humanity pass your test?" Before Seraphina could answer, Lord Caliph stood up in the crowd. "Impossible. The human must have cheated. No primitive species could defeat a void stalker." "He used the environment and intelligence," Queen Ardelia said calmly. "Both are legitimate tactics in the trial." "But he mocked it," Caliph protested. "He turned our greatest weapon into a joke." "And in doing so, revealed its weakness," Adrian said. "That's what humans do, Lord Caliph. We find the absurdity in the terrifying. We laugh at death because it's better than cowering from it. We make jokes in the darkest moments because humor is how we process the impossible." He turned to address the entire assembly. "You want to know what humanity offers the galaxy? We offer perspective. You've all been supreme for so long. You've forgotten how to see your own blind spots. You've mastered technology, conquered death, reshaped reality itself. But you've forgotten how to laugh at yourselves, how to find strength in weakness, how to turn disadvantage into opportunity." Princess Seraphina descended fully to the arena floor, approaching Adrian slowly. This close. He could see something in her eyes he hadn't noticed before. The galaxies that swirled in her irises weren't random. They formed patterns, constellations he recognized. "Earth constellations?" "You have passed the trial," she said formally, but her voice was different now, uncertain. "Humanity has earned its voice in the assembly." The crowd erupted in discussion, some cheering, others protesting. But Adrian wasn't paying attention to them. He was looking at Seraphina, really looking at her as Queen Ardelia had suggested. The way she moved was graceful. Yes. But there was something underneath it, a careful control that reminded him of soldiers who'd learned to hide injuries. The way she held herself apart wasn't just arrogance, it was isolation. And those Earth constellations in her eyes. "Your Highness," he said quietly, too quiet for the crowd to hear. "Have we met before?" For just a moment, fear flashed across her perfect features. Then, the mask was back, the armor of arrogance and disdain. "Don't be ridiculous, human. This is the first time I've lowered myself to acknowledge your species' existence." But as she turned to leave, Adrian caught her looking back at him. And in that glance was something that made his soldier's instincts scream that the real battle hadn't even begun. Ambassador Reeves was waiting for him at the arena's exit, tears of relief streaming down her face. "Adrian, you did it. You actually did it. Humanity has a voice now, a real place in—" "Ambassador," Adrian interrupted gently, "I need you to do something for me, quietly." "What?" "I need you to access the medical records from New Haven, specifically, the genetic samples we took from the wounded after the Cathari attack." Reeves frowned. "Why would you—" "There was a woman, silver blood. We treated her injuries but never identified her species. I need to know if we kept any samples." "Adrian, what is this about—" He looked back at the arena, where Princess Seraphina stood beside her mother, accepting congratulations with that same, perfect, isolated smile. "I'm not sure yet," he said. "But I think today's trial was just the beginning of something much bigger." As they walked back to their quarters, Adrian couldn't shake the feeling that Queen Ardelia's words from last night were echoing in his mind. More personal than you know. The pieces were there. He just needed to figure out how they fit together. But one thing was certain. The arrogant princess who'd mocked humanity had Earth constellations in her eyes. And that wasn't a coincidence. The political ramifications of humanity's success in the trial would ripple through the galaxy for years. But Adrian suspected the personal ramifications were going to hit much sooner. That evening, as the three suns set in their impossible dance, Adrian received another summons. Not from the Queen this time, but from someone else. The message was simple. The Garden of Singing Crystals. Come alone. We need to talk about what you saw in my eyes. It was signed with a single letter S. The Garden of Singing Crystals was a place out of dreams, or perhaps nightmares, depending on one's perspective. Adrian made his way through the palace corridors, following the subtle environmental cues that served as directions in Valdian architecture. The walls grew more translucent as he approached, until he could see through them to the garden beyond. Crystals of every imaginable color grew like living things from surfaces that defied conventional geometry. They hummed in harmonious frequencies that created a melody that seemed to bypass his ears and resonate directly in his bones. The air itself shimmered with sound made visible, rippling patterns of light that danced between the crystalline formations. Princess Seraphina stood at the garden's heart, her back to him, one hand touching a massive amethyst formation that towered above her. She'd changed from her ceremonial armor into something simpler, a flowing dress that seemed to be made of captured aurora. Without the trappings of royal authority, she looked younger, more vulnerable. "You came," she said without turning around. "Your message was intriguing," Adrian replied, stepping into the garden. The crystal song shifted slightly with his presence, adding a new note to their eternal composition. "Do you know what these crystals are?" Seraphina asked, still not facing him. "Some kind of acoustic phenomena unique to your world." She laughed. But it was bitter, not mocking. "They're memory stones. Every Valdian who's ever lived has their experiences encoded in these crystals. 3,000 years of history, singing in perfect harmony." She finally turned to face him, and the earth constellations in her eyes seemed more pronounced in the garden's ethereal light. "Every Valdian except me." Adrian moved closer, careful not to disturb the smaller crystals that grew from the path. "What do you mean?" "My crystal is here," she said, gesturing to a formation near the amethyst giant. It was beautiful. A deep sapphire shot through with veins of silver, but it was silent. "It has never sung. The harmonizers say it's because I'm still young, that it will find its voice in time. But I know better." She met his eyes directly for the first time since he'd arrived. "You asked if we'd met before. We haven't. But you've met my mother. Really met her. I can see it in how she looks at you." "At New Haven," Adrian confirmed. 15 years ago. 15 years and 9 months, Seraphina corrected. "I've done the math. Valdian gestation is typically 3 years, but mine was accelerated. 9 months. Like a human's." The implications hung in the air between them like a physical presence. Adrian felt his heart rate spike, his mind racing through possibilities he didn't want to acknowledge. "That's impossible," he said quietly. "The biological incompatibilities alone should make it impossible." "Yes," Seraphina interrupted. "But my mother is not just any Valdian. She's descended from the Shapers, the ones who first learned to manipulate genetic code like your people manipulate clay. And she was dying when you found her." Adrian remembered. The silver blood, the wounds that seemed to eat at her from within, the desperate measures he'd taken to keep her alive. "I gave her blood," he said, the memory crystallizing. "A field transfusion. It was insane, shouldn't have worked. But she was dying and human blood, it turns out, has some unique properties when introduced to a dying Shaper's system." Seraphina finished. "It triggers an ancient survival mechanism, a genetic adaptation protocol that hasn't been used in millennia. The Shaper's body doesn't just accept the foreign genetic material, it integrates it." She turned back to the silent crystal, pressing both hands against its surface. "I'm not supposed to exist, Commander Cross. I'm an impossibility, a hybrid that breaks every law of biology our sciences recognize. Half Valdian, half human. The first of my kind." Adrian's legs felt weak. He found himself sitting on one of the garden's bizarre benches, his mind struggling to process what she was telling him. "You're saying you're my daughter," The word fell between them like a stone into still water, sending ripples through everything. Genetically, biologically, impossibly your daughter. Does anyone else know? Mother, obviously. A few trusted medical specialists who've been sworn to secrecy, and Lord Caliph, unfortunately. Adrian's head snapped up. Caliph knows. Seraphina's expression darkened. He's known for years. He's been using it as leverage over my mother, threatening to expose the contamination of the royal bloodline if she doesn't support his anti-human policies. It's why she's had to remain neutral when she wanted to support humanity's inclusion. And you, Adrian asked, how long have you known? I've suspected for years. The Earth constellations in my eyes, they appeared when I turned 10. The way I could understand human languages without translation, even before the universal translators were calibrated for Earth tongues. The dreams. Dreams. She looked away. I dream of Earth sometimes. A world I've never seen, but somehow know. Blue skies, single sun, rain that falls from clouds instead of crystallizing in the air, and battles. I dream of your battles. Commander, New Haven, especially. It's like genetic memory, encoded in my very cells. Adrian stood, pacing now, his soldier's mind trying to strategize around this impossible situation. Why tell me now? Because Caliph is planning something, Seraphina said urgently. The trial today was supposed to be your death. When you survived, it disrupted his plans. But he won't stop. He can't afford to. If humanity gains equal standing, if our species truly integrate. She gestured between them. What I am becomes not an abomination but a bridge, a symbol of unity he can't allow to exist. What's he planning? There's a peace celebration tomorrow night. All the delegations will be there, including yours. Caliph has supporters among the military caste, extremists who believe in Valdian purity. I think, she paused, conflict clear on her face. I think he means to assassinate the human delegation and frame it as mother breaking sacred hospitality laws. It would destroy her reign and justify expelling humanity permanently. Adrian's jaw clenched. We need to warn. Warn who? Seraphina interrupted. Caliph has been careful. There's no proof, just observations and overheard fragments. Mother can't act without evidence, not without seeming tyrannical. And you, a human accusing a high lord of conspiracy, after you just humiliated our greatest champion. She was right, and Adrian hated it. But then something occurred to him. You said you dream of my battles, my memories. Yes. Then, you know how I think, how humans think. He smiled, and it was the same expression he'd worn facing the Void Stalker. We don't need to stop Caliph. We need to let him reveal himself. Seraphina stared at him. That's insane. That's human. For the first time since he'd met her, Princess Seraphina truly smiled. Not a smirk, not a mocking grin, but a real smile. And in it, Adrian saw something that made his chest tight. He saw his own mother's smile, the one she'd worn when he'd done something that surprised and delighted her. All right, she said. What do you need from me? First, I need you to keep being yourself. Arrogant, dismissive, hostile to humanity. Caliph can't suspect anything's changed. That'll be difficult, she admitted. After today, after learning what humans are really capable of, maintaining that facade. You're a princess, Adrian said. You've been wearing masks your whole life. She nodded slowly. And you, what will you be doing? What humans do best, improvising. He paused, studying her. Can I ask you something? Given what we've just discussed, I think you've earned the right. Why the hostility before you knew the truth? Why did you hate humanity so much? Seraphina was quiet for a long moment, her hand returning to her silent crystal. Because I could feel it. the human part of me. It was like an itch I couldn't scratch, a song I could almost hear but never quite catch. I hated humanity because I hated the part of myself I couldn't understand. It's easier to mock what frightens you than to face it. And now, she touched her eyes, where the earth constellations slowly turned. Now I understand that I've been fighting half of myself. Mother always said I was special, that I would bridge two worlds. I thought she meant politics. I never imagined. A chime resonated through the garden, harmonizing with the crystal's song. "Someone's coming," Serafina said, her entire demeanor shifting back to cold royalty in an instant. "Follow my lead." Lord Caliph entered the garden moments later, flanked by two guards whose armor seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. His expression when he saw Adrian was like someone who'd bitten into fruit and found it rotten. "Princess," he said, bowing slightly. "I didn't expect to find you entertaining the human." "I wasn't entertaining him," Serafina said, her voice dripping disdain. "I was explaining to him that one lucky victory doesn't change his species' status. They may have won a voice, but a whisper in a chorus of roars is still just noise." Caliph's smile was sharp. "Wisely said, Your Highness, though I wonder if the commander appreciates the wisdom." "The commander," Adrian said, matching Serafina's cold tone, "understands his place, though I admit, I'm curious about yours, Lord Caliph. Sending guards to shadow a princess in her own palace seems presumptuous." "These are dangerous times," Caliph replied smoothly. "There are those who might seek to influence Her Highness, corrupt her with inferior ideas." "The only corruption I see," Serafina said, "is the assumption that I need protection in my own home." She waved dismissively. "Leave us, Caliph. The human was just departing anyway." "Of course, Your Highness." Caliph bowed again, but his eyes never left Adrian. "Commander, I look forward to seeing you at tomorrow's celebration. Do try to dress appropriately. It would be a shame if humanity's representative were to stand out." The threat was barely veiled. After Caliph and his guards left, Serafina maintained her cold expression for another full minute before allowing it to crack. "He's escalating," she said quietly. "Those guards, they're from the Shadow Regiment. They're not supposed to operate within the palace." "Then we're running out of time," Adrian said. "I need to get back to my delegation. Prepare them without alerting Caliph's spies." "Adrian," Serafina said, and the use of his first name stopped him cold. "Be careful. You're not just risking yourself now. If Caliph succeeds, if he exposes what I am before the worlds are ready—" "He won't," Adrian promised. "I've fought for humanity my whole life. Now I have even more reason to fight." He paused at the garden's edge. "You're not an abomination, Serafina. Your evolution. The galaxy just doesn't know it yet." As he left, the crystal's song seemed to shift, and for just a moment, he could have sworn he heard a new voice joining the harmony young, uncertain, but unmistakably there. Serafina's crystal had found its voice. Back in the human quarters, Adrian gathered his team: Ambassador Reeves, Commander Sarah Chen from the Diplomatic Security Detail, and Dr. Marcus Webb, their xenobiology expert. "We have a problem," Adrian began without preamble. "Lord Caliph is planning an attack during tomorrow's celebration." "How do you know this?" Reeves asked. "I have a source. Someone highly placed who can't act officially but wanted us warned." "The Queen," Chen guessed. "I can't say," Adrian replied, which was technically true. "But we need to be ready, not to prevent the attack that would tip our hand. We need to survive it and expose Caliph in the process." "That's insane," Webb said. "That's the second time today someone said that to me," Adrian mused. "Must be onto something." He outlined his plan, watching as their expressions went from skeptical to thoughtful to grimly determined. It was dangerous, possibly suicidal, but it was also their best shot at protecting not just themselves, but humanity's future in the galaxy. "There's one more thing," Adrian said. "Dr. Webb, I need you to analyze something for me, quietly." He handed over a small vial containing a single hair, one that had fallen from Seraphina's head during their conversation. "Compare it to the genetic samples from New Haven, the ones with the silver blood." Webb frowned. "Why would—" "Just do it and keep the results between us for now." That night, Adrian stood on his quarters balcony, looking up at the alien stars. Somewhere among them was Earth, impossibly distant, but somehow feeling closer than ever. He thought about the impossibility of what he'd learned. The daughter he never knew he had, the enemy planning their destruction, and the celebration tomorrow that would determine humanity's fate. His wrist communicator chimed softly. "A message from Webb. Analysis complete. You need to see this." Adrian made his way to the makeshift lab Webb had set up. The doctor's face was pale, his hands shaking slightly as he handed over a data pad. "It's impossible," Webb said. "The genetic markers, the chromosomal structure, it shouldn't exist, but it does. Commander, this sample is half human, half Valdian, and the human markers." He pulled up another screen. "They match yours, perfectly." Adrian stared at the data. Scientific proof of what Seraphina had told him. His daughter, an impossible bridge between two species that shouldn't be able to create life together. "Doctor, I need you to encrypt this data with everything you have. No one else can know. Not yet." "Commander, this is the discovery of the millennium. Proof that humans and Valdians can create something that half the galaxy would see as an abomination and the other half as a weapon." Adrian finished. "Until we stop Calith. Until we secure humanity's position. This stays buried." Webb nodded slowly. "What about the girl, the source of the sample?" "She's under my protection," Adrian said firmly. "Whatever happens tomorrow, she survives. That's non-negotiable." The next day came too quickly. The celebration was held in the Crystal Ballroom, a space that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Delegations from across the galaxy mingled. The air, thick with 100 different atmospheres, kept separate by invisible barriers that allowed sound, but maintained each species' required environment. Adrian wore his dress uniform, the deep blue of Earth's oceans with medals he'd earned in battles most here would consider primitive skirmishes. But he wore them with pride. Each one represented lives saved, impossible odds overcome, the human spirit refusing to break. Princess Seraphina entered with her mother, and even among the gathered beauty of a dozen species, she stood out. Her gown was a masterwork of light and shadow, constantly shifting to reveal new patterns. But what caught Adrian's attention were her eyes. She'd hidden the Earth constellations somehow, made them less obvious. Smart. Lord Calith was there too, surrounded by supporters, his smile never wavering as he watched the human delegation. "Remember," Adrian murmured to his team, "when it happens, follow the plan." "You're sure it'll happen?" Chen asked. Before Adrian could answer, the lights flickered, not dimmed, flickered, like reality itself had hiccuped. Then the screaming started. Void stalkers, 3 of them, materialized in the ballroom center. But these weren't like the one Adrian had faced in the arena. These were smaller, faster, clearly designed for assassination rather than gladiatorial combat. And they were heading straight for the human delegation. "Now," Adrian shouted. His team scattered according to plan, not fleeing, but moving to specific positions. Adrian himself rolled forward, toward the attackers rather than away, a move that clearly surprised them. "Protect the princess," Calith shouted, his guards moving to surround Seraphina. But Adrian caught the slight smile on the Lord's face. This was his plan, make it look like the humans had brought violence to a peaceful celebration, then tragically failed to save them. But Adrian had his own plan. "Webb, now," he called. Dr. Webb activated the device. He'd been carrying a modified medical scanner, recalibrated to emit the same frequency Adrian had discovered disrupted the Void Stalkers. It wasn't enough to stop them, but it made them visible, solid, trackable. "Everyone lights," Adrian commanded. The human delegation pulled out industrial-grade flashlights, the kind used for search and rescue in deep space. The concentrated beams hit the Void Stalkers, making them screech and recoil. But the real surprise came from Serafina, breaking free from Calith's guards with a move that was distinctly human in its efficiency. She grabbed one of the ceremonial light staffs from the wall and joined the fight. The staff blazed with concentrated stellar energy, and when she swung it at the nearest Void Stalker, the creature simply evaporated. "Impossible!" Calith shouted. "How does she know?" "The same way I knew," Adrian said, now standing beside Serafina, their backs together as they faced the remaining attackers. Observation, adaptation, and a refusal to accept that anything is unbeatable. Together, father and daughter fought the Void Stalkers, Adrian with human unpredictability and tactical thinking, Serafina with Valdian grace and power. But underneath, something more. The way they moved together, anticipating each other's actions without speaking, was like watching a dance that had been choreographed in their very genes. When the last Void Stalker fell, the ballroom was silent except for the humming of overloaded light sources. "Interesting," Queen Ardelia said, her voice cutting through the silence. "Lord Calith, can you explain how Void Stalkers, which can only be commanded by those with access to the military codes, came to attack our guests during a celebration of peace?" There must be a security breach," Calith stammered. "Indeed," the Queen continued. "Guards, check Lord Calith's genetic signature against the command codes used to release these creatures." "That's not necessary," Calith began, but the guards were already scanning. The result was immediate and damning. "It's a match, Your Majesty." Lord Calith authorized the release. "To protect us," Calith shouted desperately. "The humans are a contamination. They've already corrupted our pure bloodline. The princess herself is what?" Serafina stepped forward, and as she did, she let the disguise drop. The Earth constellations blazed in her eyes for all to see. "Is proof that Valdian and human can create something new, something stronger." The gasps that rippled through the crowd were like a physical force. "You see," Calith pointed at her triumphantly, "she's an abomination, a hybrid. The Queen has hidden this shame, this pollution of our sacred—" His words were cut off as Adrian's fist connected with his jaw. It wasn't elegant or sophisticated, just a simple human punch that sent the Lord sprawling. "That's my daughter you're talking about," Adrian said quietly, but his voice carried to every corner of the ballroom. This time, the silence was absolute. Queen Ardelia rose from her throne, and when she spoke, her voice held the weight of 3,000 years of authority. "Lord Calith, you are charged with treason, attempted assassination, and violation of sacred hospitality. You will be confined pending trial." As the guards dragged him away, she turned to address the assembly. "Yes, Princess Serafina carries both Valdian and human heritage. She is the first of her kind, but perhaps not the last. The galaxy stands at a crossroads. We can choose fear, isolation, and stagnation. Or we can choose growth, integration, and evolution." She looked at Adrian, then at Serafina. "Today, a human and a hybrid saved this assembly from an attack born of prejudice and fear. Let that be the lesson we take from this. Not that we are different, but that our differences make us stronger." The celebration that followed was subdued, but genuine. Species that had barely acknowledged each other found common ground in their shock and curiosity. And at the center of it all, Adrian and Serafina stood together, no longer soldier and princess, but father and daughter. "So," Serafina said quietly, "what happens now?" Now, Adrian looked around the room, at the future being rewritten in real time. Now we figure out what it means to be family. She smiled, and this time, there was nothing held back in it. I think I'd like that. As the three suns set over the Valdian capital, casting impossible shadows through the crystalline palace, Adrian Cross stood with his impossible daughter and watched the galaxy change. It wasn't the ending of the story. It was the beginning of something entirely new. The aftermath of the celebration left the palace in a state of controlled chaos. News of Princess Seraphina's heritage spread through the galaxy faster than light itself, carried by quantum communicators and whispered through diplomatic channels. Adrian found himself in the eye of this storm, standing in Queen Ardelia's private study as morning light from the three suns painted everything in shifting hues of gold and silver. The Council of Worlds has called an emergency session, Ardelia said, her fingers dancing over a holographic display that showed hundreds of messages streaming in from across known space. Half demand Seraphina be examined, studied, verified. The other half want her exiled, or worse. Over my dead body, Adrian said flatly. That might be their preference, Ardelia replied with a tired smile. You've upended 3,000 years of established order in 3 days. That's impressive even by human standards. Seraphina entered the study without ceremony, having abandoned the formal protocols that once defined her every movement. She looked exhausted, and Adrian noticed she was wearing simple training clothes, rather than royal attire. The Cathari ambassador wants to meet with me, she announced. Apparently, they're fascinated by the biological implications. They want to know if I can survive in their methane atmosphere. Can you? Adrian asked, genuinely curious. I don't know, Seraphina admitted. There's so much about myself I don't understand. The Valdian medical texts say I shouldn't exist. Human biology says I'm impossible. Yet here I am. Here you are, Ardelia agreed, moving to stand beside her daughter. And now we must decide what that means for all of us. A chime announced another arrival. Ambassador Reeves entered, followed by Dr. Webb, both looking harried. Commander, Your Majesty, Your Highness, Reeves said formally, then dropped the diplomacy. We have a situation. Earth's government is divided. Some want to claim Seraphina as a human citizen. Others want to study her. And a militant faction is calling her existence an act of biological warfare by the Valdians. Biological warfare. Seraphina laughed, but there was no humor in it. I'm a person, not a weapon. To some, there's no difference, Webb said quietly. Your existence proves that human and Valdian DNA can combine. That has military applications that will never be explored, Ardelia interrupted, her voice carrying absolute authority. My daughter is not a template for super soldiers. With respect, Your Majesty, Reeves said carefully. That's not entirely your decision anymore. The precedent has been set. The possibility exists, even if we all agree not to pursue it. Someone will. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Adrian watched his daughter, still strange to think of her that way, as she processed this reality. Her face, so expressive now that she'd dropped her masks, showed a progression from shock to anger to something like determination. Then we need to control the narrative, Seraphina said. If people are going to see me as a symbol, we decide what I symbolize. What did you have in mind? Adrian asked. She turned to him, and he saw his own strategic mind reflected in her alien eyes. You showed the galaxy that humans could stand against their greatest warriors. I need to show them that human and Valdian together can do something neither could do alone. Before anyone could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the palace. The harmonious crystals that provided ambient sound suddenly shrieked in discord. What is that? Adrian demanded, his hand going to the sidearm he'd insisted on carrying despite protocol. Ardelia's face had gone pale, her skin's opalescent quality flickering with distress. The deep shields are failing. That's impossible. They've stood for 2,000 years. The what? Reeves asked. Planetary defense screens, Serafina explained quickly. They keep the void from intruding into real space around our world. If they're failing, she didn't need to finish. Through the study's massive windows, they could see it happening. The sky, usually a pristine canvas for the three suns, was developing cracks, not clouds or atmospheric disturbance, but actual fractures in space itself, spreading like a broken mirror. Calith, Ardelia breathed. He must have had contingencies. A hologram materialized in the center of the room, Lord Calith, or rather a recording of him, his expression triumphant even in imprisonment. If you're seeing this, the recording said, then my arrest has triggered the Deep Shield's collapse protocol. You have perhaps 6 hours before the void consumes your precious capital. The only way to stop it is with the restoration key, which I've hidden where only a pure Valdian could survive to retrieve it, the quantum depths beneath the palace. Your hybrid abomination will die trying to reach it, as will any human fool enough to attempt it. The recording flickered and vanished. The quantum depths, Ardelia said, her voice hollow. It's a realm of pure energy where physical laws become fluid. Only those with complete Valdian biology can maintain coherence there. So we send a Valdian, Adrian said. It's not that simple, Ardelia replied. The depths respond to intent, to will. Calith has probably keyed them to reject anyone loyal to me. It would need to be someone with Valdian biology, but a different mental pattern. Someone he couldn't have anticipated. Everyone turned to look at Serafina. I'm only half Valdian, she said quietly. I might dissolve the moment I enter. Or, Webb said suddenly, his scientific mind racing. Your human half might be exactly what you need. Humans are remarkably adaptable at the quantum level. It's why we survived our first fumbling attempts at FTL travel. Our consciousness doesn't rely on quantum coherence the way Valdian minds do. You're talking about my daughter walking into a realm that could tear her apart at the molecular level, Ardelia said. I'm talking about her being the only one who might survive it, Webb countered. Adrian had been quiet, his mind working through alternatives, but he knew there weren't any. Outside, the cracks in the sky were spreading, and through them, things were beginning to seep through not creatures, but wrongness itself. Patches of space where reality simply didn't work correctly. I'll go with her, he said. You can't, Ardelia said. A full human would die instantly. Then I'll go as far as I can. She shouldn't face this alone. Actually, Serafina said, a strange smile crossing her face. That might work, Dr. Webb. You said human consciousness doesn't rely on quantum coherence. What if my human half could anchor someone else's consciousness, keep them stable in the depths? Webb's eyes widened. Theoretically possible, but the risk... Everything's a risk now, Serafina interrupted. She looked at Adrian. Are you willing to trust me? Really trust me? Adrian didn't hesitate. Yes. The next hour was a blur of preparation. Valdian scientists worked alongside human engineers, rigging equipment that might help them survive the quantum depths. Webb and his Valdian counterparts developed a consciousness-linking device, something that would allow Adrian and Serafina to share mental space, using her hybrid nature as a bridge. This is insane, Reeves said for perhaps the dozenth time. We're sending our best soldier and their princess into a death trap, based on theoretical science and hope. Welcome to being human, Adrian said, adjusting the neural interface crown that would link him to Serafina. We've been doing this since we figured out fire might not kill us. Serafina laughed, and it was genuine, warm. Is that where I get it from? The urge to do stupidly dangerous things, just to see if they're possible? Probably, Adrian admitted. Your mother's species spent 3,000 years being cautious. Humans spent 3,000 years seeing how many ways we could almost die and survive. The entrance to the quantum depths was hidden beneath the palace's foundation, in chambers so old that even the Valdians had forgotten their original purpose. As they descended, the walls changed from crystal to something that hurt to look at directly, surfaces that seemed to exist in more dimensions than the mind could process. "Remember," Webb's voice came through their communicators, already starting to break up. "Once you're linked, you'll be sharing not just thoughts, but fundamental existence. Adrian, you'll be dependent on Serafina to maintain your coherence. Serafina, you'll need Adrian's human stubbornness to push through the depths' attempts to analyze and categorize you." They stood at the threshold, a doorway that looked like someone had cut a hole in reality itself. Beyond was not darkness, but something worse, a constantly shifting maelstrom of possibilities, where matter and energy were suggestions rather than facts. "Ready?" Serafina asked, holding out her hand. Adrian took it, surprised by how normal it felt. Warm, solid, real. "Let's go save the world. Worlds. Whatever." They activated the neural link and stepped through together. The sensation was indescribable. Adrian felt himself coming apart at the most fundamental level, his atoms wanting to disperse into probability clouds. But then, Serafina was there, not just holding his hand, but holding his very existence together. Through their link, he felt her experiencing the same dissolution, but where he was being pulled apart. She was being pulled in two directions, her Valdian half trying to maintain quantum coherence, her human half trying to maintain physical reality. Together, they found a balance. The quantum depths were a nightmare of impossible geometry. Stairs that went up and down simultaneously, corridors that existed in the past and future, but not the present. Creatures, or perhaps just ideas that had taken form that noticed them and tried to communicate in languages that were really mathematical equations. "How do we find the key?" Adrian asked, though in this space, speaking was more like thinking very loudly. "We don't find it," Serafina replied, her mental voice steady despite the chaos around them. "We become the kind of beings it wants to be found by." Through their link, Adrian felt her shifting their combined consciousness, not moving through space, but through states of being. It was like his experience in the trial of fear, but instead of confronting his failures, they were navigating through possibilities. They were warriors defending the innocent. They were scholars seeking truth. They were children playing in gardens of light. They were old, watching civilizations rise and fall. They were everything they could be, all at once. And then they found it, or it found them. The restoration key wasn't an object but a concept given form, a crystallized idea of preservation and protection. It hung in a space that wasn't space, guarded by Calith's final trap. The trap was elegant in its cruelty. To claim the key, one had to prove their purity, not of blood, but of purpose. It would scan whoever touched it and judge whether their intentions were solely for their own species' benefit. "He knew," Serafina said, understanding flooding through their link. "He knew that neither a human nor a Valdian could pass this test. We'd each be thinking of our own people first." "But you're both," Adrian said, "and neither—" "I'm something new," she agreed. "But is that enough?" Through their link, Adrian felt her doubt, her fear that she belonged nowhere, that she was truly alone in the universe. And in that moment, he did something that surprised them both. He opened his mind completely, showing her every memory he had of family. His mother, dying but still smiling when he brought her flowers picked from their garden. His squad mates, who became brothers and sisters in battle. Ambassador Reeves, who'd been like an aunt to him. And now, impossible but undeniable, her, his daughter, who he'd known for days but would die to protect. "You're not alone," he said through their connection. "You never will be." Serafina's response wasn't in words, but in emotion, a wave of belonging. of acceptance, of finally understanding what home meant. And when she reached for the restoration key, it came to her willingly, recognizing in her not purity of species, but purity of purpose to protect all life, regardless of its origin. The return journey was faster, but more dangerous. The quantum depths, robbed of their prize, were collapsing, trying to drag them down into probability and paradox. Adrian felt his consciousness fragmenting, despite Serafina's efforts to hold him together. "Let go," he told her. "Save yourself." "Absolutely not," she replied, with a stubbornness that was definitely human. "We go together or not at all. Besides, what would I tell Mom that I left you in a quantum paradox? She'd never forgive me." Even facing dissolution, Adrian found himself laughing. And maybe that was what saved them, the sheer absurdity of joking while reality collapsed around them. It was so fundamentally human that it acted like an anchor, pulling them back toward real space. They burst through the threshold just as the quantum depths sealed themselves, possibly forever. Adrian collapsed, his body shaking from the effort of maintaining coherence in a space where coherence was optional. Serafina knelt beside him, the restoration key glowing in her hands. "We did it," she breathed. "You did it," Adrian corrected. "I was just along for the ride." "No," Ardelia said, appearing with a contingent of guards and scientists. "You did it together, as it should be." The restoration of the deep shields was almost anticlimactic. Serafina simply held up the key, and it dissolved into pure energy that spread across the planet like a wave. The cracks in the sky sealed, the wrongness retreated, and reality reasserted itself with almost audible relief. But the real change came after. The footage of Adrian and Serafina entering the quantum depths together, the human and hybrid risking everything to save a Valdian world, spread across the galaxy within hours. The narrative that Serafina had wanted to control wrote itself not of contamination or warfare, but of cooperation and evolution. The Council of Worlds emergency session took a very different tone than expected. Instead of debating whether Serafina should exist, they debated what her existence meant for the future. Trade agreements were reconsidered, military alliances restructured. The fundamental assumption that species were separate and should remain so was questioned for the first time in millennia. 3 days later, Adrian stood in the Garden of Singing Crystals, listening to Serafina's crystal, harmonizing with the others. It had found its voice, unique but complementary, adding something new to the ancient song. "So what now?" Serafina asked, joining him. "Earth wants you back as a hero. The Valdians want me to become a symbol of integration. The galaxy wants to study us both." "What do you want?" Adrian asked. She was quiet for a moment, then smiled. "I want to learn how to be human, and Valdian, and whatever else I am. I want to travel to Earth and see the blue skies I dream about. I want to show other worlds that different doesn't mean dangerous." "That's a lot of wanting." "I'm told humans are good at wanting impossible things." Adrian laughed. "That we are." He paused, then added, "I've put in a request with Earth's government. Ambassador, not soldier. Someone needs to help navigate this new reality we've created. And someone needs to teach me about my human heritage," Serafina said. "Mom's tried, but there are some things you can't learn from observation."
"Like what?"
"Like why humans laugh at danger. Like how you find hope in hopeless situations. Like what pizza actually tastes like. Mom's attempts at recreating Earth food have been disturbing." They stood together, father and daughter, human and hybrid, watching the 3 sons of Valdian set in their eternal dance. The galaxy was changing around them, ancient certainties crumbling, new possibilities emerging. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. "You know," Adrian said, "when I came here, I thought I was fighting for humanity's recognition. I never imagined I'd be fighting for family." "Family," Serafina repeated, testing the word. I like that. It's very human. It's very universal, Adrian corrected. Every species has some version of it. We just might be the first to prove that family doesn't have to mean the same species. A chime interrupted them. Ambassador Reeves appeared in the garden, her face showing a mixture of exhaustion and excitement. The Council of Worlds has made a decision, she announced. They're establishing a new program, the Integration Initiative, voluntary genetic sharing between compatible species, with full medical support and legal protection for any resulting offspring. You mean there might be others like me? Serafina asked. If they choose it, Reeves confirmed. The galaxy has seen what you two accomplished. Some are calling it the next step in evolution. Others are calling it the end of species purity. But everyone's talking about it. And Earth, Adrian asked, has officially recognized Princess Serafina as a dual citizen, the first human Valdian citizen in history. There's already talk of a state visit. Reeves smiled. Your mother would have been proud, Adrian. Humanity reaching for the stars and finding family there. That night, there was another celebration, smaller and more genuine than the formal diplomatic gathering. Humans and Valdians mingled freely, sharing food that each species could digest, telling stories that universal translators sometimes mangled into comedy. Adrian watched Serafina moving between both groups, equally comfortable with each, bridging gaps with her mere presence. Queen Ardelia joined him on the balcony, overlooking the celebration. Thank you, she said simply. For what? For saving her. Not just in the depths, but from the isolation she was drowning in. For showing her that being different doesn't mean being alone. She saved me too, Adrian said. In more ways than one. They stood in comfortable silence, watching their daughter laugh at something Dr. Webb was explaining with elaborate hand gestures. What do you think happens now? Ardelia asked. Adrian considered the question. I think the hard part begins. Fear and prejudice don't die just because we proved integration is possible. There will be those like Calith who see Serafina as a threat to the established order. There will be challenges we haven't even imagined yet. But she's strong enough to face them. She has your intelligence and grace, and humanity's stubbornness and adaptability. She's the best of both worlds, literally. And she has a father who would walk into quantum uncertainty for her, Ardelia added, and a mother who changed 3,000 years of tradition to protect her, Adrian countered. Below them, Serafina had started what appeared to be an impromptu dance lesson, trying to teach Valdian movement to clumsy human diplomats while learning Earth dances that defied Valdian physics. It was chaotic, ridiculous, and somehow perfect. You know, Ardelia said, I never thanked you properly. For New Haven. For saving my life. You don't need to. I do. Because without that act of compassion from a stranger, none of this would exist. Serafina wouldn't exist. This moment, where our species stand on the brink of something unprecedented, wouldn't exist. Adrian thought about that. About the chain of causality that led from a desperate battlefield rescue to this moment of two civilizations learning to laugh together. Maybe that's the real lesson, he said. Not that humans are special or that Valdians are superior, but that small acts of compassion can change the universe. Very philosophical for a soldier. I'm learning. My daughter seems to think I need more education in Valdian philosophy. And you're teaching her human humor in return. Someone has to... Have you heard her attempts at jokes? They're technically perfect, but completely missing the point. Ardelia laughed, a sound like silver bells. Then we each have our work cut out for us. As the celebration continued below, Adrian realized that this was what victory really looked like. Not conquest or submission, but understanding. Not one species proving superiority, but two species discovering they were stronger together. The princess who had laughed at the human warrior now danced with both human and Valdian partners. Her existence proof that the impossible was just another word for opportunity. And the warrior who had come seeking respect for his species had found something far more valuable, a daughter, who would reshape the galaxy's understanding of what it meant to be alive in a universe of infinite possibilities. 6 months had passed since the integration initiative was announced, and Earth had never seen anything quite like Princess Serafina's arrival. Adrian stood at the landing platform of New Geneva Spaceport, watching the Valdian diplomatic vessel descend through Earth's atmosphere. The ship itself was a work of art, its crystalline hull refracting sunlight into rainbow patterns that painted the clouds. "Nervous?" Ambassador Reeves asked, standing beside him. "Terrified," Adrian admitted. "It's one thing to bond with your daughter while fighting for your lives. It's another to show her around your homework, introduce her to Earth culture, try to be a normal father." Normal flew out the window the moment she was conceived through an emergency blood transfusion between species, Reeves said dryly. "Besides, the entire planet is watching. No pressure." The ship touched down with impossible grace, and the gangway extended. Queen Ardelia emerged first, her opalescent skin adapting to Earth's single sun with a subtle shift in hue. Behind her, Serafina appeared, and Adrian felt his breath catch. She had changed in the months since he'd left Valdian. Her confidence had evolved from arrogance to genuine self-assurance. She wore a dress that somehow managed to honor both Valdian and human aesthetic traditions. And her eyes, those impossible eyes with Earth constellations, were bright with excitement. "Father," she said, and the word still sent a jolt through Adrian every time she used it. "Serafina," he replied, then gave up on formality and pulled her into a hug. She stiffened for a moment. Physical affection was still new to her, then relaxed into it. "Earth smells different than I imagined," she said into his shoulder. "Less metallic, more alive." "Wait until you smell New York pizza," Adrian said, pulling back. "Your life will never be the same." Queen Ardelia approached, and Adrian bowed formally. "Your Majesty, welcome to Earth." "Thank you, Adrian. Though I believe for this visit, you should call me Ardelia. We are, after all, family of a sort." The crowds that had gathered beyond the security perimeter erupted in cheers and camera flashes. Serafina watched them with fascination. "They're not afraid," she observed. "Some are," Adrian said honestly. "But humans are curious creatures. We tend to be more interested in the new than scared of it. Usually." The motorcade to the Earth Integration Center was surreal. Serafina pressed her face to the window like a child, marveling at everything from street vendors to pigeons. "Birds just fly freely here?" she asked, "without regulation or purpose." "Most things on Earth do," Adrian replied. "It's kind of our thing, organized chaos." The Integration Center had been built in record time, a fusion of human and alien architecture that had already become a symbol of the new era. Inside, Dr. Webb was waiting with his team, along with something Adrian had kept as a surprise. "Princess Serafina," Webb said, bowing slightly, "we've prepared a presentation on your biological uniqueness, if you're interested." "Later," Adrian interrupted. "First, there's someone she needs to meet." He led them to a smaller room where an elderly woman sat in a wheelchair, her eyes sharp despite her age. She looked up as they entered, and her weathered face broke into a smile. "My God," she breathed, "you look just like him." "Serafina," Adrian said softly, "this is Maria Cross, my mother, your grandmother." The room went silent. Serafina stood frozen, processing this. In all their discussions of family, Adrian had somehow never mentioned his mother was still alive. "But you said she died," Serafina said, confused. "The cancer—" "Valdian medical technology," Maria said, her voice warm. "Your mother arranged for treatment 5 years ago, when the first trade agreements were signed. I've been in remission ever since." She held out a trembling hand. "Come here, child. Let me look at you." Serafina moved forward slowly, kneeling beside the wheelchair. Maria's fingers traced her face gently, feeling the subtle differences in bone structure, the barely visible scales at her hairline, the unusual warmth of her skin. "You have his stubbornness," Maria said. "I can see it in your jaw.